We saw the heated moments between Dave Hester and his co-stars on Storage Wars. But there's one co-star who crossed a line that Dave could never forgive. What happened off-camera? Let's dive into the bitter feud that changed everything. Can you guess which co-star was involved? The auction yard wakes with a clatter that only insiders recognize as music. Keys hit metal. Locks jostle. A breeze picks up the dust and paints the morning in a thin haze. Buyers arrive like storm fronts, each with a private forecast about what this day might bring. Somewhere among them stands a man in a cap, eyes narrowed, heart already racing a step ahead of the crowd. He is measuring doors with his gaze, counting edges and silhouettes through a crack in corrugated steel. He is listening to silence the way a mechanic listens to a motor. For rhythm, for warning, for opportunity. He swaggered when swagger worked, went still when stillness made rivals nervous, and unleashed that signature call like a hammer on the last nail in a deal. There was the gambler who pushed him just for the sport of it, the collector who made art out of junk and sometimes beat him by believing in sentiment over spreadsheets, the smiling duo who undercut him with charm and then smiled wider when the numbers landed their way. The audience loved these clashes because they looked like chess you could learn to play. The rules were simple: highest voice, strongest stomach, fastest count. But there is another current running under the fun. The show that made this universe famous brought its own gravity. Cameras make everything heavier. A small slight can become a season arc. A casual joke can echo like a drumbeat across cable reruns and late-night binge watches. A single shove of a bid card was built for that, at first. He took the attention the way a long-distance runner takes wind, as something to lean into until it becomes part of the job. He sold the catchphrase on hats. He wore the hat to sales. He turned the sales into a funnel for the shop, then turned the shop into a scoreboard. He did not pretend to be an underdog. He preferred being the storm that made everyone else plan their day. Then the weather changed. There are fractures you can see forming if you look closely. The voice was the same. The eyes were the same. The rhythm was different. He gave an extra foot of space where he once would have crowded. He took a breath where he once would have barked. He did the math a little more quietly. If you watched closely, you could see him map the yard like a captain charts a reef. There were safe channels. There were no-go zones. He would plant himself near certain doors and drift away from others if a shadow crossed the line he had drawn in his head. He could be icy. He could be warm. He could be both in a single minute, depending on who stepped into range. There were days he looked like the man who had started it all. He would sweep a locker with a single glance and know, truly know, that the others were counting the wrong things. He would bump a bid just enough to force a rival to overpay, then raise an eyebrow as if to ask whether the lesson took. He would load the truck with that flat satisfaction of a craftsman who does not need a crowd to celebrate the cut that fell exactly where he wanted it. And then a shadow would lean into frame. A voice would call a lot of numbers. A rhythm he could not forgive would set the beat. You could watch the temperature shift around him without a word. It is hard to forgive someone you must see. A wound is a memory instead of a current fact. People always want a name. They want to clip a face to a feud and file it under drama. They want to guess as if guessing were a way of participating in a story they only ever watch. The truth is that the name matters and does not matter. It matters because power matters. It does not matter because what broke was larger than two people. Still, the story sharpens when you understand where his patience ends. He has sparred with rivals for years and walked away genuinely amused. He made a sport of rattling a certain collector because the collector rattled right back. He took delight in pushing the gambler past comfort because that is what gamblers are built to endure. Those were rivalries that tested his skill. They did not test his tolerance. The person he did not forgive stood not as a rival, but as a rule. In this world, auctioneers are gravity. Their patter is time. Their hammer is finality. The rhythm of their chant tells every buyer how long the heart has to decide. In the best version of the day, they are neutral. They are the weather everyone agrees to work in. The day that neutrality cracked, a promise he believed in cracked with it. Life carried on. That is what lives do. He opened the door to work and let the familiar smell of cardboard dust and motor oil steady him. He still found peculiarly perfect things in perfectly peculiar places. He still turned a profit from a locker that looked like a museum of other people's plans. He still bought low, sold higher, and pitied anyone who did not learn from losing to him. But he also recalibrated. He built walls where there had been fences. He left early on days when staying meant eroding something he wanted to keep. He became the kind of professional who sees a situation go sideways in the corner of his eye and adjusts his path 6 steps before anyone else notices. He did not avoid the person he would not forgive. He avoided giving that person 1 inch more of his piece than the job required. Time changed the cast. Not that he softened. He sharpened differently. He saved his edge for the work and kept his temper for himself. The hooks of the old feud still snag when the wrong voice sets the next lot. The memory still bristles when the wrong smile catches the light. But the business is a boat he sails with, or without the company he would choose. He will not. When the show stretched its legs again and pulled him back into episodes long rumors had promised, the atmosphere changed without anyone saying anything. Energy carries its own language. People who work together can feel when a seam takes weight. The trick in those new days was to let the cameras record the hunt and not the history. He played his part. He did not play nice so much as he played necessary. He has always favored straight lines. He likes a locker he can read from the back to the door. He likes a deal that ends with a handshake that feels like a handshake. He likes a day that adds up. This feud is the crooked line in a life built on straight ones. It bends decisions he wishes were simple. It warps days that should be easy. It will not straighten because a viewer wants a tidy ending. So yes, there is a name at the center of this story. Yes, it is someone you have seen 1,000 times calling the counts and setting the pace and giving the yard its pulse. Yes, there was a day when words spilled into pushes and the line between job and justice evaporated in heat. Yes, for him, the clock never reset after that. And yes, he learned to thrive even with that clock ticking in the corner of every sale. What does he do with a grudge he will not drop? He files it under never again. He builds a life that does not require a single person's approval. He trains his eye on the work because the work has never lied to him. He takes the money and lets the noise go. He walks out of the yard with the same posture he walked in. And the question still hangs like heat over asphalt. If a man like this never forgives, who sits on the other side of that decision? Whose voice turns his shoulders tighter? Whose presence rearranges his path by an inch at a time? You think you know, you probably do. But stories like this deserve a clean reveal, not a rush. The door that changed everything does not live in a storage unit. It lives in his memory, rolling up each time the day gets hot, each time a certain voice cuts the air with practiced rhythm. He can feel the weight of that voice the way you feel when the weather shifts before a storm. He does what he always does. He measures the room, checks his breath, sizes the moment. He tells himself the same thing he tells himself before every bid. Count what matters, ignore what does not. Then the chant begins, and he knows in his bones that today will not be about a box of tools or a folded flag or a dusty piece of furniture with more life than it looks. Today will be about gravity, People outside the business think buyers and auctioneers are enemies or old friends. Most days, they are neither. They are two sides of a machine that only works when both sides do their jobs fairly. The auctioneer calls time, keeps pace, and makes order out in the face. It landed in the rules. What you trust about a day like this is simple. The chant will be steady. Videos and rumors collect around a day like that, each person telling it in the key they prefer. He won. He lost. He loaded trucks and unloaded grudges onto shelves in the back of his mind, where they would not trip him unless he let them. The show carried on with the same chemistry of rivals and reprobates and comedians and savants. The yards kept filling. The cameras kept rolling. The country kept watching. But watch him closely, and you could see the new choreography. If Dan stood at the mouth of a lane, he stepped into another. He treated it as a boundary. If the cadence sped up, he did not try to outpace it. He slowed. If the patter lingered, he did not use it to press an advantage. He stayed level. In a world where every edge counts, he deliberately gave up every edge that required trust he no longer had. Forgiveness, to him, is not poetry, it is accounting. It is the act of accepting an imbalance you believe will not be corrected and deciding to live with it anyway. He learned that lesson in courtrooms where settlement numbers have no adjectives and in yards where a smile can disguise a push. He counted everything after the break. He counted words. He counted inches. He counted exits. When the ledger did not balance, he did not rage. He simply did not pay with his peace. There is a day years later that shows you how completely the wound changed him. The yard thrums. A locker door jerks, sticks, then rolls up with a hollow slap. Inside, chaos. Tubs, tarps, something big under a quilt. A murmur runs through the crowd. He does not move toward the noise. He moves toward the edge. He watches the reflection of the inside scene in a nearby window. He lets a rival burn energy hunting for an angle while he looks for proportion and structure in the negative space. When he bids, it is late and precise. When he wins, he nods once and walks away from the front. It takes him longer to circle back to the office because the path he takes keeps him from having to pass the person calling the next lot. Small choices, everywhere, every day. People sometimes ask whether he and Dan ever cleared the air. The question misses the point. Air clears itself, or it does not. They returned to the same spaces because both are professionals and because time pushes people back into patterns when there is work to do. They did not need to agree. They needed to avoid lighting matches near dry grass. That is the bargain they silently made. It is the one he keeps. If you want the blow-by-blow, it is not as complicated as fans wish it were. Tension has been collecting for a long time, as it does in small industries where memory is long and pride is a tool everyone carries. A joke went wrong. A correction came sharp. A bid made in one rhythm got called in another. In that narrow world, that is the beginning of a fight. It does not matter whose version wins in print. What matters is that the scaffolding fell for him. He did not believe in the platform anymore. He chose to believe in his stance and his ability to move. The surprising part is that the show did not suffer for the distance. If anything, it found a new tension. The frame widened. The stories grew up a little. Audiences who arrived for slapstick found themselves staying for something closer to craft. They watched him manage heat with cool, turn a roaring day into a steady profit, refuse bait when bait would always have been the fun choice. He made his stubborn boundaries into a quiet masterclass in longevity. Not that he softened. He still relished a bid that made a unit everyone else called junk and saw the exact 3 items that would rent a forklift and fuel the truck for a week. He still wore the cap, still used the voice, still sold the catchphrase because it was his before it was the internet's. He simply saved his sharpest edge for where it belonged: the work. And about that work. The real story under the feud is how he kept his business clean while the surface got messy. He adjusted his shop's intake to reduce reliance on units that required delicate negotiations with the same auction houses. He cultivated private picks and quiet deals. He strengthened relationships with a few auctioneers who had earned his trust over 1,000 small days. He diversified his channels. He trained assistants to bid for him in lanes where he preferred not to be. He turned a grudge into a plan. There is a quiet grace in the way people around him adapted. Rivals who had once pushed him just to see the reaction learned to respect the new walls. A few even gave him space on purpose. Auctioneers who were not part of the break called their days with extra care when he was in the yard. Cameramen learned where not to stand if they wanted to capture the story, without catching a look that would sour the atmosphere. This was not fear. It was courtesy, the kind that grows in small communities where everyone understands that a little care preserves a lot of commerce. Time added its own varnish. The edges of the break are rounded. The day itself slid farther back on the shelf, not erased, not forgiven, not inflamed, simply catalogued. New seasons brought new buyers. New buyers brought new rivalries that had nothing to do with the old wound. He could look across a lane and see Dan without feeling the first flare. The feeling had cooled into a steadiness that did not invite conversation. It did not require it either. On rare occasions, they shared a frame that hummed with unspoken rules. The count would stay steady, the bids would stay businesslike, and the minute the lot closed, he would be gone before the compliments could arrive. He did not linger. He did not loiter. He saved every extra second for the dock, the truck, the next step in the chain, where the only language is weight and leverage, and the satisfying clank of a ratchet doing exactly what it is supposed to do. If forgiveness ever visited, it did not stay long. It glanced around the room, noticed. Stories like this tempt us toward simple endings: a public apology, a handshake in a season finale, a final montage where the two men nod at each other across a lane and the music swells. This is not that. This is a story about how a person continues. The show continues because it is built to. The man continues because he built himself to. The feud continues not as a headline, but as a private rule that keeps him safe in a world that loves heat more than health. If you are still wondering whether he ever forgave Dan, the honest answer is that he never needed to for the show to keep running, and for his life to make sense. Forgiveness would have been nice. It was not necessary. Respectful distance turned out to be enough. He keeps it, he spends it wisely. He does not talk about it unless he must. He would rather talk about a locker full of office furniture that looks like a problem and ends up being a solution hidden under 4 ugly chairs. He will still shout when the moment calls for it. The voice still cuts the yard in half. It still makes people smile and roll their eyes and fiddle with their paddles. It still buys him seconds when he needs them, and it still buys him silence when the best move is to let someone else panic. The reputation remains. The man remains. The rule remains. Gravity is gravity until it is not. If it changes on you, you change how you walk. Maybe that is why the story resonates, not because of celebrity or spectacle, but because everyone who has ever worked under someone else's rules knows how it feels when those rules shift mid-game. Everyone knows what it is to draw a private line and keep it. Even if it means adjusting your way, he is a worker. He shows up and does the job. He simply refuses to pretend the past never happened. There is one last image worth keeping. The yard is quieter now. The day is done. Trucks hum and grumble. The pavement exhales its heat. He stands by the open back door of his van, looking at the stacks and bundles and boxes he just bought. He runs a hand over the top box, then the next, as if blessing the load. He closes the door with a firm pull,